Hi there, I'm Lucas Price, aviation underwriter at Avemco Insurance Company. At Avemco, we value safety. We're proud to insure pilots who are dedicated to continuous training and improving their skills. That's why we're honored to sponsor the Schiff Show, as well as the FAA Wings program. That's right, the pins that you receive for completing an FAA Wings course are sponsored and provided by Avemco. Because to us, safety isn't just a program. It's a commitment to the aviation community. We're proud to support the Schiff Show, and we're proud to support you. So enjoy tonight's show, and when you call us or when you visit our website for an insurance quote, don't forget to tell us that the Schiff Show sent you.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the 15th episode of the Schiff Show. I can't believe it's already time for another one. Tonight, we're going to be talking about engine failures, prevention, identification, and confrontation. We'll look at an accident that involved an engine failure and some things that went wrong. I'm Brian Schiff, a 41-year flight instructor, and on the side, I play airline pilot. I've done that for about 37 years to support my GA habits. I say that not to brag, but to give some credibility as to I've been around the block, which means I've forgotten a lot. But studying and preparing these programs actually helps me learn quite a bit of what I've already forgotten. During this episode, again, we'll be discussing engine failures and partial power loss. We'll also address the pilot actions involved with dealing with this and other type of emergencies and how you can use ATC to your advantage. New this year in the Schiff Show 2.0, if this is your first time this year joining us, is we've got a game show, a fantastically fun trivia game show testing your aviation knowledge that you can actually win prizes. Our top winners, our top scorers will win prizes for answering the questions correctly and quickly. Also, with this year, including this episode and episode 12, you can earn a flight review using the Schiff Show. I'll talk about a little bit about that later, but just complete 3 knowledge credits using this Schiff Show episode and 3 flight credits that we recommend. Have a CFI sign you off. You got a flight review and you've completed 1 phase of wings. And that is good for an endorsement for another 24 calendar months. Do that every month and you're good for another 24 months every time you complete it with the Schiff Show. And the continuing education keeps you pretty current. Again, episodes 12 and this one, 15, are now available. Soon we'll have 12, 13, 14, and 15, and then every one after that available for this program. The continuing education, again, will keep you safe just like the pros. And look for instructions on the episode page of this episode, the main page under Earn Wings Credit / Flight Review. It'll explain the process. Watch for more information about this in my emails. If you're not subscribed to my emails, you can do so by clicking on the top of the schiffshow.tv webpage. There's a link to join and sign up for the emails. Again, the Schiff Show webpage will serve as a one-stop shop, bypassing the confusing FAAsafety.gov website to access everything you need to accomplish this. The place you'll go is to the, again, the main page on the Schiff Show episode. Here we go. So for example, here you'd click on this link right here. And when you click on the Earn Wings Credit / Flight Review link, then you'll click on the link to access a copy of the Schiff Show activity for flight review and phase of wings. When you click on that, you'll get a worksheet. On there will be a link to 3 quizzes, 1 for watching the show and 2 for the course resources that are provided, and then 3 flight credits that you go do with a flight instructor, and then have your flight instructor click on the CFI completion link, and they can sign you off right there on the wings page, and you will get an endorsement for your logbook. You'll get a certificate for completing a proficiency phase and for the flight review as well. Those are kind of cool, and you'll also get a sticker to put in your logbook. Tonight, I'm thrilled to welcome my good friend Mark Tomicich, an FAA retired FAA attorney, senior attorney for the FAA. We've done some work together. He's from the FAA, and he's here to help. He's done quite a bit of litigation, post-accident litigation. He's a member of the Society of Air Safety Investigators, and he teaches an accident investigation course for the DOT on the side as well. He's represented the FAA on dozens of on-site accident investigations and NTSB public hearings, including major accidents such as ones you might know, the U.S. Air Flight 427 near Pittsburgh, Korean Air Flight 807 on Guam, TWA Flight 800. That accident is near and I would say not so dear to my heart, but had some friends on that flight. And the Continental Express Flight 3407, Buffalo, New York, worked on that as well. So anyway, Mark, welcome. I'm happy to have you here on the show. We've been friends. We've worked together on many of these cases. And now that you're retired, I'm glad to see you out and about doing this kind of stuff.
Thanks so much, Brian. It's great to be here. I love your show. It's a great format. Always learning something with each show. And you probably already know this, but the FAA motto, you kind of said that FAA is here to help, but we also have a motto, and that's, we're not happy till you're not happy.
I thought that was the airline motto.
We probably stole it from the airline.
Yeah. So the work that you've done for the FAA, obviously it gets you digging deep into a lot of the accidents, what happened, why they happened, who's at fault, what air traffic control is supposed to do. What else have you gotten from that kind of work that I think gives you a very great position to be helping out here on this program, since we're looking at accidents?
Well, I'm fortunate enough, kind of going from the back end, and that's the litigation. I get to work with great people like you. I meet incredible experts, working with really smart attorneys, with the Justice Department. And of course, all of this starts with the accident itself. And with the accident, we go into the facilities. I'm dealing with air traffic control experts in the agency, pilot experts in the agency, accident investigators. So all of those things through the years for decades. And every time, even my last, I'm trying to think, last couple of accidents, I could walk away from the facility saying, I've learned something.
I can imagine. Studying accidents, of course, we all do it. Excuse me. We all do it because we don't want to have the same thing happen to us. We see something happen to another pilot, a fellow pilot. We say, oh gosh, I don't want that to be me. What happened? What did they see? What did they know? We're going to look at an accident tonight that you were actually a part of. You worked on this one, and we'll discuss this accident. That'll bring up some topics about what you should do as a pilot, some legal aspects of what happens after an accident. We'll look at some steps you can take to avoid an engine failure, some steps you can take to deal with one when it happens. And then, of course, the expectation and continuation bias I'm just going to touch on, but more importantly, how to talk to air traffic control and how to tell them what's going on so that they can help you the best that they can. So we'll take a look at all that. Again, just like every episode, we'll try to stick with our 5 segments. Accident review, we'll talk about procedures, techniques, and technology that can help you avoid this kind of an accident, things that are pertinent. And then, of course, we'll have fun with our game show at the end. I just want to also say that there is only an hour, and rather than have gobs of material, I really like what we've done with our new format in that I put a lot of course resources in there, and I'll refer to them as we go. If you see a little symbol of a book and resources up at the top of the page, you'll know that what we're talking about here, there is a bunch more information in the course resources, and that you can go study that for a deeper dive on that topic. But to let you know about it, we have this 1-hour show to give you the tip of the iceberg on those topics. So let's start with the accident review. In this accident, the aircraft began in its day in Stella Maris in the Bahamas, proceeded to Treasure Coast International Airport in Florida to clear customs and refueled, and then departed again for a cross-country flight to DKS. I can't remember what airport that is, but had to divert when an engine problem developed near Flagler County Airport. And that's what we'll get into, is the end of that leg from Fort Pierce to Flagler County. So this aircraft was a Bonanza H-35, Beech H-35 Bonanza. It happened on January 4, 1957, and it was on its last leg of this trip home from the Bahamas, headed to Knoxville, Tennessee. That's what it was, under Part 91. The pilot was an instrument-rated private pilot with roughly 1,300 hours of experience. He had refueled at Fort Pierce after clearing customs and then departed VFR and later picked up an IFR clearance after the accident happened. And he reported having engine problems. He said, "We've got a vibration in the prop. I need some help here." Cruising at 7,500 feet, after getting up to 7,500 feet, the pilot checked in with Daytona Approach and reported a vibration in the propeller along with an oil pressure issue. He requested assistance, and the controllers promptly identified Flagler County Airport, roughly 7 miles away, as the closest airport, and began vectoring the Bonanza toward it, advising that nearby airports were IFR, with ceilings between 900 and 1,000 feet AGL. There was an area of widespread cloud cover over most of southern Florida, with about 1,000-foot bases. The pilot confirmed that he was instrument rated and consented to an improvised radar-monitored ASR-style approach to runway 29 at Flagler. The only approach to that runway, or that airport, was RNAV, and the pilot wasn't equipped for an RNAV approach. He didn't have GPS or RNAV equipment on board. He was trying to get an ILS or a localizer, but that was only offered at airports that were further away. There was no ASR published at Flagler, but the controller had a lot of experience giving ASR approaches and offered it, and the pilot accepted it, and it worked out mostly quite well. And an ASR approach is when the controller is giving vectors, basically headings and altitudes, to get you to the runway. They'll just say, fly this heading and maintain this altitude, and when it doesn't work just right, they'll tweak it, give different altitudes and headings until you get to the runway. A limited number of TRACONs, or approach controls, still provide ASR approaches in the U.S., but they're relatively few and used mostly for training or for operational necessity or emergencies rather than routine operations. As flight instructors, you can request it, and they usually will be happy to give it to you at a military base because they need to keep current on giving them. And again, you'll have to look in the chart supplement to know which airports actually do that.
And Brian,
yeah,
just let me just throw in just a quick note too. When the NTSB noted that this was not a published ASR approach, that just meant that they didn't have it at the facility developed. A pilot can't go out and find a published ASR approach. It is confined to the facility. But as you said, these controllers have been doing a lot of ASR approaches, and they had other ASR approaches in the area.
Gotcha. And from what I could see from the way this went, they did a pretty good job until something kind of went downhill at the end. Yeah. Okay, good. Thanks. So a few minutes later, the pilot reported that the oil pressure was now 0 and the cylinder head temperatures were cool. So I don't know. This is just me throwing this in here. It's not in any report, but to me, that sounds like the engine wasn't running. But at that point, I don't know what the situation was. The pilot didn't tell air traffic control, but he did say 0 oil pressure and the cylinder head temperatures are cool. And at that moment, the airplane was already quite close, about 2.5 miles from the approach end of Flagler's runway 11 and around 5,300 feet MSL. So it's just to the west of the airport, northwest of the airport. But neither the pilot nor the controller explicitly clarified whether the engine had partially or completely failed. I should say that the pilot had not clarified to the controller that the engine was partially running or completely failed. That point had not been brought up. Over the next several minutes, the Bonanza descended in the clouds while being vectored via a series of heading and altitude changes to set up for a final approach. Radar data showed that the airplane being taken out to approximately 6.5 miles northeast of the airport, and then turned south and west toward the runway with instructions to descend first to 3,000 feet, then to 2,000 feet, and then finally to 1,600 feet as it approached the final approach course. The controller, and I think those were for obstacles, are they not, Mark? Because I think, if the controller knew that there was an engine failure, you really can't give a bottom altitude, right? I mean,
correct. He's basically assigning minimum vectoring altitudes for obstacle clearance.
Okay, and as the airplane got to an area, and we're going to show you a minimum vectoring altitude chart that you should be aware of as well. So he cleared the flight to land on runway 29 when it was about 3 to 4 miles from the runway. Then the controller lost radar contact when the aircraft target on the radar descended below about 2,000 feet or 200 feet MSL, roughly 2 miles from the threshold. And just doing some quick math, 200 feet, 2 miles from the threshold is a little bit low. Typically, you'd want to be 300 feet for every mile. So 600 feet at 2 miles would have been appropriate. The last transmission from the pilot was, "We need help, we're coming in with smoke." It's hard to tell exactly what that meant or where the smoke was, but certainly it's indicative that there was more of a problem. We've got some of the ATC audio, and I'm going to go ahead and play it for you for context. So we will go ahead and
Brian, before you play that first one, let me add a little bit of
Sure.
context as well. So in the control room, and obviously this is what I know of going to the accident and working the accident, there was actually training going on. So the approach controller who they're talking to a trainee. When the pilot makes his first transmission, identifies the emergency. The controller who was doing the OJTI pushed the trainee aside and assumed control of the position. So that's happening. At the same time, he's saying, "Hey, Soup, I got a problem. We've got an emergency." So that's kind of all hands on deck. You've got a lot of people in the control room come to the aid of this controller, and there's another controller working other airspace for Daytona Beach. And he's actually going to do the ASR approach. That'll be the second controller. So there's a lot happening in the control room once this pilot says what he's about to say in this first transmission.
Okay, very good. And interestingly, you said different voice. You'll hear a different voice on here. And pilots, from our perspective, we hear different voices. We hear controller changes, and now I understand why we hear a different voice on this one. I also don't recall this pilot even declaring an emergency or saying "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday," but the controller understood from what the pilot told him, which you're about to hear. The controller seemed to have taken upon himself to declare the emergency for the pilot because it was obvious that this was an emergency situation. Is that correct?
That's it. That's it in a nutshell.
Okay. All right. I'll go ahead and play the audio. For context, it might sound a little bit different because it's going to come through my microphone, but I want you to hear it. So here goes the first one where the pilot reports the initial problem.
So this is 375 Bravo. We got a vibration on a prop. I need some help here. Remember 375 Bravo, right to the closest airport is 12 o'clock, 12 to 1 o'clock in 5 miles. And are you on I'm IFR. We're getting a little vibration. We got a little pressure drop. We're going to have to drop quickly here. Remember 375 Bravo is clear to Flagler via radar vector. Descend to maintain 2,000 on your present heading. 2,000 on present heading. 375 Bravo. Thanks for your help.
Okay, and I meant to mention also that you might hear some overlapping talking because the way that the ATC audio was recorded, you hear other channels overlapping, and that's just the way the audio is. Not much we could do about that. So the next thing is the typical, when an emergency happens, the controller is going to ask you for fuel and souls on board, and this is that exchange happening.
Fuel you got. 3 souls on board. You got plenty of fuel. I just need a number. 4 hours. 4 hours. President 375 Bravo, and which engine? Or I'm sorry, you said it's a vibration in your engine. Is that correct? That's correct. We got a propeller or something going up, backing it up here to see.
So he reported 3 souls on board, 4 hours of fuel, and the controller was looking for a little more information and asked vibration, and he said, yeah, he thinks it's a propeller going. The next transmission is where we're talking about the weather and that he needs to shoot an instrument approach.
November 375 Bravo, continue your present heading. Again, we're going to put you close to the Flagler County Airport for runway 29er. We're going to try to get you as close as we can to the airport. Right now they're showing broken 900-foot ceiling, so an instrument approach is going to be necessary to get in there. What are your intentions? Give us the localizer, please. Okay, the best we can do is on at that airport, or we can reverse course back to Daytona. It's the only precision approach we have in our airspace for the ILS at Daytona. If we don't have precision approach, is there anything with a localizer or anything VFR? No, all of our airports right now are IFR. All ceilings are hovering right around 900 to 1,000 feet.
So that's the controller saying basically everything's IFR, and the closest airport doesn't have a localizer, or an ILS. So we talk about, here's the discussion with the controller and the pilot about the ASR approach.
I picked the nearest one and tried to break out of the 1,000, but I don't have RNAV capability. For 35 Bravo, Roger, we can do a surveillance approach and guide you into the airport. You okay with that? Lovely with that. For 375 Bravo, Roger, descend and maintain 2,000 feet and contact Daytona approach now 125.8. 258, thanks for your help. You're welcome.
So yeah.
And Brian, I would just throw it in at this point in time. So just for those pilots who have never flown an ASR approach, the controller is essentially navigating for the pilot. And so the controller who's going to be on the next series of communications, he's setting up on a scope, he's zooming into Flagler so that it will have a final approach course depicted on his radar scope. And he's working a much smaller area. So it basically like he's zooming in to Flagler so he can see a close-up of that area. So typically these controllers are working, let's say, anywhere from 20 miles to maybe a 50-mile radius. This ASR controller is now coming in and zooming in to a much smaller area so that he can give precise navigational guidance. So that's where he can give some really good fine-tuned vectors to this airplane.
And that's a fantastic tool for pilots to be aware of, that if you get into an emergency, especially if you make the decision to overfly this much IFR, he was VFR over the top on this flight over a vast area of IFR and clouds below. And there really aren't a lot of options other than IFR. And if you're having to go into an airport where you just doesn't have an instrument approach or you're not qualified, that's the kind of help that can be very handy. He continued, he got vectors until at some point this happened. And this is the audio where he declares, he tells ATC that he has no oil pressure. In any event, then he gets vectored in for the approach. And he later says, and when ATC loses him off radar, that we're coming in with smoke, we need help, something like that. It gets pretty dire. Witnesses at the airport described a low overcast, 3 miles of visibility and mist on the ground. The airport director saw the Bonanza emerge from the clouds at very low, just above the trees along the extended center line, runway 29, wings level, but descending before it disappeared into the tree line. The aircraft eventually hit some trees and then it crashed into this house. 3/4 of a mile short of the runway, slightly left of the extended center line, and then it struck that roof of the house, as you can see. Much of the fuselage was destroyed in the fire. The control system showed continuity, still had controls of the airplane and evidence of a pre-impact flight control failure. There was no evidence of that. The pilot, passengers both suffered fatal injuries. And obviously the house, as you can see, suffered heavy fire damage. There was no injuries to anybody on the ground.
One thing just to point out, at the previous photos with the house, the investigators at that point in time are trying to establish what they call the four corners of the accident. So they want to find out essentially where all the parts of the aircraft are. And that's a very, very important kind of starting point. For this particular accident, I think the total length of the accident scene was probably less than 100 feet. But if you had an in-flight breakup, for example, you would have an accident path that was much longer, hundreds and hundreds of feet. And so the four corners of the accident obviously are much larger, and it's much more difficult to document.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. So with all the pieces in a very small wreckage area, this indicates that nothing really happened to the airplane until it hit. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Well, the investigators discovered a large hole in the engine crankcase and fragment of the number 4 connecting rod lodged inside, indicating a catastrophic internal failure of the engine. A teardown at Continental Motors revealed that severe lubrication issues along with thermal mechanical damage at the number 4 connecting rod journal, which actually basically a loss of oil pressure and oil lubrication caused it to heat up and break. It basically seized up and broke in flight. The aircraft was right about here was the last radar hit. You can see, and then you can see where it hit the house. It was about 3/4 of a mile from the runway there, but the last radar hit right here is where it hit the house. You can see they almost made it to the airport. Again, the house and the runway, so close. Interestingly, and there's a shot of the house, and here's a shot looking down the final approach with the pinpoint, the yellow pinpoint there, showing where the house is.
And Brian, just again for context, the ceilings were about 900 feet. So where radar contact was lost when he was about 200 feet above the ground, he was below the ceiling. So he was VMC at that point.
Right. And so he was, and I'm going to show you some, slides in a couple slides from now of the altitude versus distance, and we'll see that it had an increase of rate of descent, which tells us a little something too. The NTSB probable cause. Basically, the NTSB found that oil-starved number 4 connecting rod caused total engine failure, and because the pilot never clearly reported the power loss, the controllers weren't aware of the severity. They vectored the airplane into a longer IMC approach than they would have had they known that the engine had totally failed. So again, keeping ATC in the loop of exactly what you got going on is very important. Complicating this fact was the fact that the airplane the pilot extended the landing gear a little bit too soon. And I know that you as an FAA personnel, you don't get involved with the investigation part of it, do you, Mark?
Well, so the investigation, yes. So basically what happens is the statute says we get to participate in the investigation, but the secretary or basically the FAA cannot participate in the probable cause and findings. Right. So what you're seeing on this slide, the FAA did not participate in that portion of it. And I would note also that I disagree with some of the findings in the probable cause. I mean, we do know that there was oil starvation. We do know there's a failure, but the total loss of engine power, it really doesn't put it in context. And honestly, we don't know exactly what happened in those final seconds. So when he reported, he was north of the field, reported 0 oil pressure, but cool cylinder heads temps. I think the NTSB investigator assumed that's when the engine failed, and that's where loss of power was. But the experts in the litigation, even the plaintiff's expert, conceded that he probably had at least partial power at that point. So I think that number 2 is not correct, and it's an assumption. And I think that the other piece of it is that 4 and 5, where the NTSB says they didn't have a complete understanding, which led the controllers to vector him too far from the airport, is not supported. And again, that we're going to see in a few more slides. But we did some extensive testing after the investigation for litigation, and we think the controllers did a great job and had him exactly where he needed to be to make the airport.
Yeah, I think what they mean by that, the controllers did not have a complete understanding of the emergency, I think indicates the fact that maybe it should say, I don't agree with that either, but I think what it should say is the pilot did not tell ATC the extent of his emergency.
Correct. So. Yeah, there clearly, he could have explained, or not so much explained, but just passed on additional information. Again, some of it would have been helpful, but I think that, your next point about when the gear goes down, that's really vital. That's decision-making in the cockpit, and that's not really going to influence what the controller does. It is all about pilot technique at that point.
Right. The controller did a fantastic job. As you can see, the airplane was gliding along what would have been that green dashed line, and where the rate of descent changes at 14, 15, and 37 seconds there, you see it come down a little bit steeper. That is probably where the pilot put the gear down. Do they know the gear was down when it crashed?
NTSB said it was inconclusive. Again, we did the investigation after the NTSB concluded their report for litigation, and I think everybody agrees that the pilot did extend the landing gear. and it would be most likely at that point. And again, that kind of goes to we train habits, right? You're always going to put the gear down at the final approach fix. In this abnormal condition, that was probably what happened, but it was the wrong thing to do.
Right. And that habit at this time was not appropriate. You can see that it was coming down about 200 feet for every, looks like about every mile. But you can see that whatever happened at that point, if that change hadn't been made, the airplane would have made it to this bottom line is miles from the runway. And the aircraft would have been 200 feet at 0 miles from the runway on the projected path that it was on before whatever happened there happened. Also, if we zoom out a little bit and look at the airspeed and altitude over time, you can see a continuous descent that looks pretty good. And at one point, maybe even levels off. But about the time it levels off, you also see airspeed decaying constantly. The point of showing this is just to show you that after an accident, this kind of stuff is looked at now that we have ADS-B with a really fine-tooth comb and really can zoom in on what happened. Yes, we're playing Monday morning quarterback and we can see, but bear in mind the glide speed of a Bonanza is 110 knots. The airplane was never gliding. It passed through 110 knots when it was about a minute or 2 minutes from crashing. But it should have been, whenever that engine failed, at least, should have been at best glide speed. And not added any drag until it happened. So in any event, let's get on to the procedures that we can look at for, that we're given, that we can learn from this. And basically the FAA says, that a thorough pre-flight inspection is important. It's your first and last line of defense against preventable accidents. And even when maintenance has just been completed, or especially then, you should never assume that the airplane is ready to fly. Mechanics are human. Even small oversights can have serious consequences in flight. Like this, you add oil and you don't put that dipstick, or you check the oil and that's not put on tight. It could, an oil leak would be bad. Anywhere the oil comes out. In this case, they did find that there was an oil leak. The fueler at the airport where they stopped and refueled reported having the airplane had oil dripping on the nose gear. So again, checking the oil on every stop would be important. A walk around may seem routine, but it's one of the most powerful tools a pilot has. And don't be, distracted when you do it as well. Expectation bias is another thing that, things have always worked right, so you expect them to continue working right. I talked about it on the Cockpit to Cal podcast with Jeff Simon 2 nights ago. And he wrote a great article about that, which is in the course resources. You see the symbol up on the top right of the screen shows you that whatever I'm talking about is in the course resources. And in this case, I'll just tell you one of the great things that he offered was that to mitigate this expectation bias or continuation bias, ask yourself these questions. Am I being objective, or is this wishful thinking? Have I acknowledged the facts that are available, or am I ignoring them? Am I playing them, off? Are my assumptions illogical or highly unlikely? What are the consequences of being wrong? If they're severe, then you really don't want to take that chance. And what options do I have to reduce or eliminate the risk? And if there are none, and the risk is for a severe problem, then you want to reconsider. Go look at that article. It's part of the resources in this course. So as far as what happens behind the scenes, I think Mark alluded to some of that. And in the interest of time, Mark, if you could just give us a brief background, like as soon as an accident happens.
Sure. Yeah. Initial report comes in. The information is going both to the FAA and NTSB. They each assign an investigator to the accident. It's going to be evaluated, and the NTSB will assign a classification. One is like the DCA emitter, where you have an air carrier. It's catastrophic. That's the worst case. Class 4 is somebody lands an airplane, skids off the runway, landing gear collapses, and maybe hits another airplane. So now you have damage to another aircraft. So that could be a class 4. That's the least severe. Sometimes the NTSB will not go out on those. And I do want to make a very important point for airmen when we talk about class 4. If the NTSB is not on scene, it has been said by some that NTSB is delegating that to the FAA. That's not correct. And so I think it's really, really important for airmen to know, if the FAA is there and you're talking to the FAA, it's for an FAA investigation. So be sure, talk to a lawyer first and get some advice before you start talking to NTSB and FAA. So getting back to the classification, once that happens, the NTSB and FAIIC go to the scene. In this case, it was a Class 3. They decided to form an air traffic group. So there's an air traffic control specialist who's assigned, and that person goes to the air traffic facility. And that's when we launched. We launched to the air traffic facility with the air traffic group for this particular accident. So that's kind of how it all gets started. Eventually, it's going to go to, once the on-scene stuff is completed, they're going to take any evidence for the engine. For example, they moved that to Mobile, did the engine tear down in Mobile. They do a lot of work away from the accident site. But those first couple of days, it's gather perishable stuff, gather the evidence, and then continue with subsequent investigative work and analysis.
And that's usually when the pilot did not survive. When the pilot does survive, we know that as pilots, we're trained to learn about NTSB 830, and we're told when to notify the NTSB. And NTSB 830 obviously tells us when. In the interest of time, I'll let you go to the course resources for NTSB 830, which is there, which lists the reasons you are required to notify NTSB. And so they're in the course resources. I think it's worth also mentioning that the difference between an accident and an incident. An accident is an occurrence associated with the operation of an aircraft that takes place between any time any person boards the aircraft with the intention of flight, and all such persons have disembarked. So between those times, that would be when the period exists in which any person suffers death or serious injury, or in which the aircraft receives substantial damage, which we'll talk about in a second. For the purpose of this part, though, the definition of aircraft accident includes also unmanned aircraft. An incident is an occurrence other than an accident associated with the operation of an aircraft, which affects or could affect the safety of operations. Serious injury and substantial damage are also defined. That's in the course resources. And you can pause it if you're watching the recording and look at these bullet points, but I want to get to the fact that we're offering actually an after-accident checklist that has been put out by Avemco. This is also in the course resources. Go to the course resources and print this after-accident checklist and procedures in the course resources page of this website. But basically, it's going to give you in priority order that safety of life, preserve the scene, notify the NTSB and your insurance company, document if you can, take as many photos as you can, and protecting the scene means also don't move anything. I think would you advise, Mark, to what extent should you interfere with the wreckage? Let's say you just crashed an airplane on a runway. You're okay. What do you do?
Yeah, well, it certainly is fine to take take photos, document not only the aircraft but ground scars. Maybe witnesses, people around you. That is all fine. You should not disturb it. Once you have first responders on scene, they need to do their job. Obviously, you're not going to interfere with them, and also law enforcement. Law enforcement will be contacting NTSB if there's a reason to. I mean, again, if it's an incident, it may be a gear-up landing, and NTSB may never even know about it. But assuming that it's something that's a little bit more serious, first responders are on scene. At that point, law enforcement's going to take control, or the fire chief will take control of the accident. They're going to talk to NTSB. NTSB will ask them to secure that. So obviously, you're not going to interfere with them, but follow the checklist. And Avemco has a very, very good checklist.
Call your attorney is probably one of the biggest things that, if you don't need an ambulance, call an attorney, but certainly do not put anything on social media. Many people have incriminated themselves by putting stuff on social media, and that is just not the place to try. We get a lot of clickbait when everybody wants, all these the internet rapid response teams hear about an accident and they want to immediately broadcast what happened and why. I like if they just give the facts, but you don't want to make conclusions until stuff is out there. In any event, if you are involved in something, please, please, please don't put anything on social media. Some techniques, some things that aren't published that basically we talk about that I teach, we can get into, but they are in some books. I think you should be aware of maintenance pre-flight cues. If you have your airplane just worked on, in this accident, the airplane was leaking oil more than normal and no oil was added. Also, there was a significant fuel imbalance. I don't really see that as a big deal because if you're flying an airplane where you switch tanks, that is not unusual. The fueler was the one who reported that there was a big difference in how much fuel he put in one tank to the other. In this case, I think the oil is more of a problem. Airplanes should not leak oil. And of course, when you see your engine instruments are trying to talk to you, listen to them. Not so much in this accident. He had a vibration first. He knew he had a problem. But I've seen and heard of many pilots who will, write off an oil pressure gauge when, it's just an indication problem. If you're looking at your oil pressure and everything looks normal, keep an eye, regularly scan your instruments all the time because you want to know what's normal. You won't know what's normal unless you see it all the time. We maybe check your instruments every 20 minutes. Just do a full scan of everything. Get used to where the normal numbers are. That way, when something out of the ordinary happens, it'll stick out like a sore thumb, like that. When you see the pressure of the oil pressure drop, now you've got, okay, that's another, are there any other signs? Like oil pressure loss and engine vibration, that's two signs. Two signs confirm each other. My truck will do this. I get this pop-up, add engine oil low, add oil. Why can't airplanes do that? Why can't they just have an add oil or low oil quantity light or something like that? But when you have a second indication, and another one would be if the oil temperature went way up. This combination, really bad. This is an emergency. You need to minimize power to preserve the engine to run a little bit longer. The lower the power setting, the longer the engine's going to work for you. And you want to land it now. I mean, if you can see a perfectly good field, you want to take it, land the airplane. I'd rather land in a field with some power than to be forced into a field or trees or a runway with no power. So basically, take that seriously. In our accident scenario, when the oil pressure was down plus vibration, I think this pilot should have been a little bit more assertive about staying near the airport. Say, keep me close to the airport. We could argue whether technique of flying and maybe circling overhead the airport was a better idea than going out to shoot an approach. If you have engine vibration and low oil pressure, you need to assume your engine's about to fail and get on the ground. Make a priority of staying close to the airport and getting on the ground, but behave as though at any minute you're going to lose that engine.
And Brian, just one other thing too, in talking, because we talked about this earlier, in talking to the controller and providing them more information. And that's a great example that you've just given. If you want to stay within 2 or 3 miles, or you want to intercept the final approach course within 2 miles. So the controller said, we're going to take you out and intercept about 4 miles. You, as the pilot in command, have that ability to say, that's great, but I really want to go and intercept at 2 miles, and I want to be at this altitude. The controllers will, especially in emergency, they're going to follow your wishes.
Right.
And that's really important, is you're the pilot in command, tell the controllers what you want to do.
Very good. Very important to do that. Exactly. Tell them what you need. There's a good, if you are an IFR pilot or you fly a VFR at night, there's a great article written by one of my favorite authors who taught me how to fly in the course resources as well. It's an IFR strategy, VFR on top, or IMC and unpublished ASR. This is a good article about flying at night or IMC when an engine problem happens. So check that out. Take the quiz on it and get another wings credit. And also energy management in IMC, there have been some techniques that, have been told if you have a high ceiling, and I've taught this before, again, technique only, high ceiling, no terrain. Dad taught me this, and Bob Hoover actually taught my dad this, which actually, I think in a couple days, Dad is getting the Bob Hoover Award in Washington, D.C. So coincidentally, rather than gliding at best glide through the clouds and breaking out of a cloud deck and then only having a small radius of action, Bob Hoover taught Dad to actually go down through the clouds at as fast as you can, VNO, and then break out, level off, and you've got a lot more energy and a lot more a larger radius of action, having 5,000 feet and 130 knots versus breaking out at 5,000 feet and having 65 knots. Not applicable to this case. I want to make that clear, but just a technique that can be done. And every accident, every incident, every emergency is different, and you've got to do what works for you. The most important thing is to give it some forethought ahead of time. So I want to jump into the technology section, and we'll get to our game show. There's a lot of technology out there now. This accident was when, Mark, 2013? I think
2013. Yeah, 13 years ago.
They didn't have the technology that we have in play today that really helps situational awareness. The iPad, the moving maps, the avionics that we have today. And I just want to show a brief video of what is available. If you don't have it, I really do recommend investing in this kind of technology, because in an emergency, boy, the hazard advisor, which you can see here, the synthetic vision, and seeing a glide ring. I'm going to go ahead and show you a video of ForeFlight. Other apps have it. Garmin has it. A lot of avionics have it built into the aircraft as well. But I'll show you these things in a video that I took flying a simulator in X-Plane and then having it play on my iPad in ForeFlight. So what you're seeing is, again, this is similar to our accident flight, only I'm in a 172. I got a problem and I click on the near airport there. I click on the airport and I hit direct to. It immediately shows me where, and I see a glide ring of how far I can glide. And it looks like in this case, now I'm in a 172, a little bit different than the other aircraft. But if it were inside that circle, that means you can make it to that airport. So I'm turning direct to the course that shows up. You can see I've got, it looks like a VFR window. At this point, our pilot, and look what happened. The ATIS showed up. As soon as you put that in, and a lot of things that are really handy show up here for you. To see the extended runway center lines of all the runways, you go to the settings, this is ForeFlight, and then turn the extended center lines on and off on the quick map settings when you have the map turned on, the digital map. You can also look at the hazard advisor. If you have it turned on, you can kind of slide the scale down and see where the hazards are. What altitude is safe? Airspeed and obstacles will show up. And it looks like here there's nothing really above 3,500. That's a good floor. This is if you have no controller. Arguably, pilots have better information now than controllers had, right? I mean, that's pretty fantastic.
That's very true. Yeah, all of those obstructions that came up, controller would not know that. They wouldn't have that information.
Yeah, this is all right there, and it's just on the iPad. You can pan around in this synthetic vision, like in ForeFlight. I'm looking at the airport. The timer at the bottom is up, and it snaps back to looking ahead of the aircraft. We're proceeding direct to the airport. I've got it fast forwarding here for the interest of time, but then we'll kind of, as we get closer to the airport, you can see the glide ring shrinking because you can't glide as far when you're lower. And we're going to turn off course, and maybe I'll put a point out there just by rubber banding the course out to a point on final, and then I can activate that leg and go intercept it. Now, depending on your emergency, this seems like a lot to do while you're gliding, but if you're proficient with the program, it really only takes seconds to do that. And what a world of information, especially if you're in mountainous areas. It can actually help you avoid the tall peaks. And you can see with that glide ring, take a look at that in mountainous area. I wish I had a picture. Notice it shows you an airspace. You're approaching the airspace, the Class D airspace. Okay. And the tower frequency is right there. Just pops up. But you can see the airport is definitely within the glide circle here. And you can kind of get yourself to the runway, engage, look at your altitude. You can put, I wish I'd have put in the bottom, the height above, I think height AGL, I think it is there, 900, 800 feet. And the distance to the runway, and kind of figure a 3-to-1 profile. These two videos are not synced up because of the fast forwarding that I did, but you kind of get the idea. You can see buildings and obstacles and towers to help you in this kind of an emergency, if you're letting down IMC or even at night
500
when you can't see. And I thought it was very valuable to show this I'm not trying to sell it. I get nothing from ForeFlight. I do like this kind of technology in the event of an emergency. Again, the caveat is you cannot use this for normal navigation. As you can see, everything within 1,000 feet turns yellow, and then within 200 feet will turn red. Anything 200 feet below the aircraft's altitude, so you'll see it turn red. But there's the runway. At that point, your VMC, you're looking out the window anyway. And you can see in this case, this engine was just shut off the mixture and glided from 7,500 feet to the runway using ForeFlight only. So you can see it's certainly doable. As far as ATC goes, they have different maps they can show us. Oh, I said I'd show you the minimum vector altitude map. This is like one overlaid on top of a sectional. And if you are talking to ATC, you're getting flight following, you can ask them, even VFR pilots, hey, what's the minimum altitude here? I'm having to glide down and I can't see or whatever. Give me a direction to where the lower minimum vectoring altitudes are. But they also have emergency maps that they can look at, right? Don't they, Mark? I mean, there's an emergency map, the minimum vectoring altitude. There's a lot of information they can use depending on who you're talking to.
Yes.
Right?
So the minimum vectoring altitude map is going to give you obstacle clearance typically it's for IFR operations. It's going to be used all the time. An emergency obstacle map, and there's also another one we'll talk about briefly. Or we can just actually put it in this group. It's an emergency altitude map that you use for the center. So the EOVM is for the TRACON. The emergency altitude map is for the center. They're basically for the same thing, which is providing the controller with some emergency information, like some topo lines, maybe some additional obstructions. The whole idea is to give the controller more information to pass on to the pilot to get to lower altitudes.
Are there landing sites or fields that
they will put major, for example, they may have a golf course on it. It's all up to the specialist who wants to design this. It may not be on there, but they'll have airports. They may have roads. They may, it all depends on how it's designed in the facility. But again, it's not like a topo map because it's limited. They can't put everything on. So, but
I think go ahead.
I was just going to say your point earlier that what's on ForeFlight is superior. Absolutely.
It's quite amazing. But I think the important thing to take away here is tell ATC what you got going on. Yes. Tell them it's an emergency. You're worried. I cannot maintain altitude. I think it's important to say that when you can't maintain altitude. And remember that a controller is probably not a pilot. So letting them know in layman's terms, not pilot terms, hey, I can't hold my altitude, my engine is quit. I mean, they'll understand a lot of it, but tell them what's wrong with the airplane, what you need, and just remember that they have tools you might not be aware of. Don't have to memorize all these maps that ATC has, but know that they have tools they can use. They got this toolbox they can open once you declare an emergency and tell them, the nature and the severity of your problem. Right? Yep.
So true.
All right. Well, it looks like we are running a little behind, but it is game time. Be sure to look at the course resources. There's a lot to add to everything we said here. To keep it fun in an hour and not lose your attention, I don't want to make this very long. So I want to offer you the information, but it's in the course resources, but I don't want to bore you here all night. We got to get to some fun time here too anyway. So we will play a game. Tonight's prizes include everything we had last month. We had a signed book from my father, where these questions came from, 1,000 Things You Thought You Knew About Aviation. Some of it is interesting, trivial stuff. Some of it is interesting aviation knowledge that would be really good. Some just trivial. But a lot of fun questions. A Shift Show polo shirt. ASA gave us, which I think I've bought one of these FAR AIMs from them since learning to fly 42 years ago. And I have like 42 of them all lined up. I want to give away a few Shift Show mugs. And our Greg Riverdale from Pilot Institute has donated 2 courses from their program, which I think is fantastic. The visuals, the virtual reality that you can use with Meta glasses or goggles is fantastic that they're coming out with. Cutting edge training stuff. And then, of course, Pivot by Flyboys just jumped in and offered to give away an iPad case, an iPad mount of your choice to fit your iPad and mount it in your airplane. That's some cool stuff. And we're getting more and more offers of giveaways. So we'll have more prizes as time goes on. But our top winners of this game show will win some prizes. To play the game show, go to theshiffshow.tv/game show on your mobile device, or you can scan that QR code, and you'll be directed to the game website. Enter your name and email address. You can enter your first name and last initial or a nickname if you'd like to remain anonymous, but we do need your email address for the prizes and to rank you on the score. You might be asked to verify that email address, so go ahead and do that just to make sure that's for our security and yours. And then get ready to test your knowledge. When the game show starts, and it's about to, you will read the question, select your answer, click on the green send button. You can change your answer anytime before you send it. And remember, watch the time, but the faster you answer, the quicker you send in the correct answer, the more points you'll get. So it is based on time to get higher score. So read the question, select your answer, hit the green send, and the faster you go, the better. You'll see your score at the end, and you'll see if you're number one, if you're the leader. I think it gives you your rank as well. So be sure, join the game, win some prizes. We're about to get started. And again, you need to be watching live. So if you're behind real time, because you can start watching the shift show 15, 20 minutes late, or you can pause it. You can do this like a DVR. But if you're not in real time, it's not going to work because you will have already missed the quiz. Also like to give a special thanks to Dad, the master of being full of Schiff. If it were not for him, I would not be as full of Schiff as I am today. So thanks, Dad, for these questions. They're a lot of fun, and he's got more now. So let's jump in. Question number 1. Which light plane manufacturer designed an automobile immediately after the end of World War II to offset canceled military contracts and a dim outlook for general aviation? So they were making all these military airplanes, making hand over fist, making military airplanes during World War II. And then all that came to an end when the war ended. So to make money, they started making cars. Which manufacturer? Was Beech, Cessna, Piper, or are we totally full of it? Maybe nobody was doing this, none of the above. But one of these or none started making cars to make money after the war. They eventually, I can't think of any manufacturers making cars today, aircraft manufacturers. So they, I guess, eventually got better. The business got better.
Yeah. Well, ironically, we've got a guy who makes cars making spaceships.
That's true. We do. We have that. Well, the answer for question 1, which manufacturer designed an automobile? It actually was, in fact, Beech. And I know, this project was abandoned in 1946 when it became apparent that the development of new aircraft models, including the new Model 35 Bonanza, would require all of their available talent. And I know you're wanting to know what that car looks like, so I did go find a picture of it and post it here. That is the Beech something car. It would be kind of cool to have one today. If anybody has one of these, please reach out and let me know. I'd love to see it. All right, question number 2. I know if this were a live seminar, you guys would be throwing stuff at me. I couldn't get away with this in a live seminar, but this is a webinar. I'm sitting here all by myself in my studio. If you know Morse code, it really does help to answer this question, but since some of you may not, I'll go ahead and populate it. The question is, where is Reno? Reno is a city. You've never heard of it? Is this in one of those states? Is it in Iowa, Idaho, Reno, Nevada, Reno, Maine? Maybe, someone's going to write in after we give the correct answer. Well, I'm going to get a lot of people write in about the unfairness of the Morse code thing. But someone's going to write in and say, there's a Reno in another state too. So I got it right. I'm talking about the biggest city, Reno. I should say, where's the biggest Reno that we know of?
Yeah, the biggest little city.
It is the biggest little city in the world.
It is.
the biggest little one. And I believe it's in Nevada. There will be more Morse code questions in the future, so give yourself an advantage on this game show. Learn some Morse code. Also, I'll repeat this question on a future episode. I'll repeat other questions, so you'll have an advantage when you see it again. Watch all the shift shows. Anyway, you should know SOS and Morse code. It's easy to recognize in Morse code and easy to remember. But SOS is a universally recognized Morse code distress signal. Dit, 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 da, 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 dit, dit, dit. Adopted internationally in 1908 to replace varied, confusing signals. And it originated from the German regulations in 1905. And it was chosen for its distinct, easy to transmit, and mistake-proof pattern. It does not stand for Save Our Ship or Save Our Souls, as many people think it does, and that came after it was actually developed. Here's a quick explanation.
Before the days of texting OMG help, ships needed a universal distress signal. Enter SOS. Now you might think SOS stands for Save Our Ship or Save Our Souls. But guess what? It doesn't stand for anything. That's right. SOS was chosen in 1905 because it's just super easy to tap out in Morse code. You don't need to be a Morse code expert to recognize that pattern. It's simple, distinct, and easy to transmit even if your radio is barely working. Before SOS, things were chaotic. Back in the late 1800s, different countries had different distress signals. Britain used CQD, which stood for All Stations Distress. Germany used SOE. Imagine trying to remember which signal to use while your ship is literally sinking.
I don't know if the video stopped. Well, anyway, true or false? Hilly and Billy Clinton are consecutive intersections on Victor 69 east of Little Rock, Arkansas. Is that true, or are we making that up? It sounds like something Dad would make up. So true or false? Hilly and Billy, those 5-letter intersections, supposedly Clinton, are consecutive intersections on Victor 69, also makes it sound made up, east of Little Rock, Arkansas. True or false? I know some people are frantically looking through their IFR. It would be the low chart. Look at the low IFR chart. If you're going to find it anywhere, that's where it would be.
That's a good hint.
Right. Hilly and Billy Clinton, east of Arkansas on Victor 69. The jokes are just flying through my head. What do you think, Mark? I know you're probably staring at the answer. So have you ever seen these intersections?
I have. So I'm thinking it's true.
There are. Yeah, it is. There are a lot of really clever intersections, creative, based on, where they are geographically in the country. It's fun. I think it would be fun to do a whole episode on all the fun approaches and intersections and the funny names and the sense of humor involved. It proves the FAA does have a sense of humor at sometimes. Some of them, right?
Some of them.
Yeah. So perhaps, maybe.
They wouldn't let us in that office because we would have a lot of fun.
Right. No, I'd be kicked out. Here they are, just to show you. The low altitude and route chart, Victor 69 east of Little Rock. There's Billy and Hilly. There they are. Although I think they live in New York now, don't they?
They do.
Yeah, maybe they need some intersections on Long Island. All right, question number 4. What is the difference between speed and velocity? I hear a lot of pilots use these two terms interchangeably. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. Why do we need two words that mean the same thing? Is there no difference? Or maybe one is referring to when you're on the ground and the other is referring to when you're in the air? One is 2-dimensional, one is 3-dimensional. Maybe one is a rate of movement and the other is speed and direction. I don't know. Do we know the difference between speed and velocity?
This almost sounds like a law school quiz.
Right. It's a physics quiz, actually.
It is.
Maybe law school and physics have a lot in common beyond the number of books So what's the difference between speed and velocity? Letting everybody have time to answer. Nothing? Ground versus air? Two-dimensional versus three-dimensional? Or one of the speed is rate of movement and velocity is speed and direction? Which one is it? One of them sounds more logical than the others, even if you don't know the answer. Because the word velocity did exist before people got into the air. And I think you can move at various speeds in different directions. So I don't know, more than just two directions. The answer is D. Speed is rate of movement. It's how fast you're moving, through the air. It's a rate. Velocity is composed of both a speed and a direction, a magnitude and a direction. So would be.
So if future question, you're going to talk about track versus heading?
Ooh, I like that. Track versus heading. Yeah, so study that. We'll have that one next month. If you watched this episode, you will get a track versus heading. If you know the difference, you'll be able to answer that question a lot quicker. All right, question 5, our last question. True or false? A VFR pilot experiencing two-way radio communications failure may enter Class D airspace without radios, circle the airport, and wait for a light gun signal. So just enter the airspace without talking to anybody and circle the airport, wait for light gun signals. True or false? You're flying VFR and you've lost your radios, lost all your electricity, no way to communicate with the tower, no way to establish two-way radio communications. Can you just fly into Class D airspace, circle the airport, watch it, wait for a light gun signal? This would be a good thing to know ahead of time. Before it happens.
would. The other thing that's really important is there a pot farm nearby? Because if there is, there's somebody with a shotgun that's probably going to take a shot as you're circling, right? So
you want to be careful where you circle. One time I was circling over a dam not long after 9/11, looking for bald eagles out near the Winfield Dam near St. Louis, and I found an eagle. It was an F-15 Eagle. Because I was circling over a dam and a power plant, and you weren't supposed to do that after 9/11.
Right.
Also, if you lose your two-way communications, don't forget, down low at Class D airspace altitudes, your cell phone might work. So also, if you're like me and have the tower phone number because they always give it to you, you can just call them on the phone. The answer to this is actually true. You can. According to the AIM, a pilot should remain outside Class D airspace until determining the traffic direction and flow. The pilot may then join the traffic pattern and watch for a light gun signal. And that is the procedure to go into Class D airspace if you've lost all comms. And the tower will see you, and if they can't talk to you, that's the next thing that's going to happen, is they're going to give you a green light or a red light. And so it's good to know your light gun signals or have them written somewhere, because green is good, red is no. I think of green as cleared to land. I think of flashing green as okay, continue inbound, enter the traffic pattern. I think of a solid red as go around, you can't land. And maybe a flashing red is you get out of here. Maybe alternating red and green are also use caution. So flashing white in the air, I think, means nothing. I better stop talking, because if I'm getting these wrong, I'm going to get more emails. Any event, thanks a lot for playing our game. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'll leave you with this. Many of you have seen it, many have not, but aviation in itself is not inherently dangerous. But last Tuesday, I actually said it was. And I think that it can be inherently dangerous, but the pilot makes it safer. But this quote says, to an even greater degree than the sea, it is terribly unforgiving of carelessness, incapacity, or neglect. And we use those words and take them for granted, but carelessness means, I can't read that, but I've got the definition for you right there. And I've got the definition of incapacity and the definition of neglect. And those things all will help make aviation more dangerous if you exercise any of those. So I do love this quote. I think it's great. Mark, hey, thanks for joining us. And a special thank you to Avemco for sponsoring this, making it possible. It's made possible by Avemco, our sponsor, and they are known for their reasonable premiums. And I've used them for many years, and I'm happy with the premiums, which you can save on if you tell them you watch the Shift Show. And great supporter of aviation safety, and I want to thank them for that. They sponsor many programs, including this one, even though it's full of Schiff. From a hangar rash to a catastrophic event, they will help make a stressful situation because a lot easier, as we know, Schiff happens. So thank you, special thank you to Avemco, special thank you to Mark for joining us and providing your input. From your experience, we're definitely going to have you back on again, Mark, because I think there's a lot of information you've picked up over the years that we can capitalize on.
I'd love to come back.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Everybody, thanks for attending tonight. We'll see you next month on April 9th at 7 p.m. Central Time here on the SchiffShow.tv. I will be running it solo. I will not have a guest next month, as I will be totally full of Schiff. Only Schiff will be on that show. Maybe I'll get Dad to join me as I have a second grandchild born right around that time. So I'm going to have to be a little bit loosey-goosey. Anyway, we'll see you next month on April 9th, the second Thursday of the month. Thank you for joining us tonight. And remember, 2 speeds, slow or screw up. Good night, everyone.